Welcome back to the Nick and Joe Show, folks. I'm Nick. I'm here in Killaloo in a flagship station on the terrestrial radio side, and he's Joseph there on doing the internet thing in our studio in Ottawa. And between us, we are the classic example of where the sum of our part, now I screwed that saying up. We are greater than the sum of our parts.
The whole
is what I'm trying to say.
The whole is greater than the sum of the parts.
See, that's why I pay him so much money to be here.
Yes. Well, to be here, not there.
To be on the air. To be the guy that's the brains of the operation.
And I just want to point out, I'm doing more than the internet thing here, ladies and gentlemen.
He's the straight guy. Put it that way.
I'm the straight guy?
Yeah, you're my Abbott. You're the Abbott to my Costello.
Good grief. Oh dear, oh dear. And first intermission, no score.
That's right.
Yeah,
they've had 4 shots on net for Montreal and 13 for Tampa.
Really?
Yep.
Okay, that's not good news for Tampa.
Well, it only takes one to beat the goalie.
No, I understand that, but you know, it's when you get that many shots on goal and you're not getting it past the goaltender. That usually leads to some psychological issues, and it's an indication to me that, you know, Carey Price probably didn't play his best in the first 3 games,
right.
But you know, he really played well, I thought, in game 4 the other night.
He was unbelievable,
and he's probably playing super. You know, he's back in the groove again, and you can steal games. You can play mediocre hockey and still win if you've got a hot goaltender. So and the Canadians, they're not playing mediocre hockey. You know, they're not a powerhouse, but they're playing solid. They're playing solid hockey. So you know, if they're getting any kind of good goaltending from Carey Price, they have a shot at this. So we'll see what happens.
Well, yeah, you're right. Although you must admit, Tampa Bay has a hot goalie too. He can be a wall himself, and this may very well come down to a goalie's duel.
Yeah, it's possible.
I doubt this is going to be
The one thing that we can all agree on, though, Nick, is that the Tampa Bay Lightning are not the Toronto Maple Leafs.
No, but even Tampa Bay has to have their run once in a while.
Yeah, and listen, ladies and gentlemen, I have to tell you, so we were all here with a friend of ours in the studio here in Ottawa, and we were just leaving, and it was the Toronto Maple Leafs were leading the series over Montreal 3-1, and our friend turned to us and said, "Yep, the collapse is about to begin." And, you know, I jokingly sort of agreed with it because I'm not a Toronto fan, as Nick is. But Nick didn't like that too much. He thought, okay, that's not going to happen. But, of course, it did. Anyway.
I'm not wrong often, but once in a while.
Enough about the Toronto Maple Leafs and hockey collapses. And on to really a more serious problem that is going to now become... you know, it was much more of a theoretical problem, but now it's really becoming a practical issue that the government is going to have to make some decisions on, and that is the whole subject of vaccine passports. Now, there's a lot, especially on the right side of the political spectrum, there's a lot of opposition to the notion of a vaccine passport. And I know, Nick, you're pretty much opposed to it as well. My take on it is a little bit different, but I'm going to let you go on for a bit here explaining what your concerns are, Nick, and et cetera, before I jump in with my pearls of wisdom.
All right, fine. Let me go first. I'll make the mess. You can clean it up. I don't have a problem with vaccines in general. I am not one of these anti-vaxxers. There's plenty of really good vaccines out there, and we all know what they are. I don't need to run down the list. And many of them I have already taken in my life. not for my time in the service. You get tetanus shots. You need a booster once in a while, that kind of thing. I don't have any problem with that. So it's not about the vaccine itself. It's about whether or not the vaccine is actually necessary. I just don't think it's necessary to get the vaccine. I don't think this is the dread disease that we've been told it was. It's certainly not Ebola. It's not the Spanish flu. It's not typhus or typhoid. It's none of these dread disease. So with all that said, they want to impose this vaccine. You have to have to get the vaccine passport, you're going to have to be double vaccinated. I don't want to be double vaccinated. I don't want to be single vaccinated. And I don't want the government to punish me either overtly or covertly to get it. Like they may come out and say, well, you don't have to have it. We'll leave it up to you to get the vaccine. But if you want to get an airline on an airplane and fly anywhere in the country or anywhere internationally, you got to have the vaccine passport. I'm sorry, I'm not interested in that. I don't want to play that game. I am not interested in that because, first of all, I don't, like I just said, I don't think it's necessary, and I don't think the benefit outweighs the cost. So with all that said, I was listening to terrestrial radio yesterday, and the host of the show I was listening to was saying, well, I don't see the problem. I don't understand. Look, I've heard the argument before, well, people who don't get vaccinated are stupid. No, they're not stupid. And you and I have talked about this before. They're not stupid. They're skeptical. Like I was looking at screaming at the radio saying, why do you trust this government? How many times, I wish I could have gotten on the air and just asked the host, how, in your personal life, how many times can somebody lie to you, demonstrably lie to you before you say you are no longer trustworthy? I do not trust you. And then force them to give you an answer. Let's say it's 2, 3, 4 times, whatever it is. And then say, and yet, when it comes to politics and your government, who you're supposed to be able to trust, they've lied to you dozens of times and you still believe them. Why? How do you make that leap? Why would you trust someone who has lied to you so often that we have lost count of the number of lies they've told? And not just little lies like broken campaign promises, but real substantive ones that actually have an impact on people and their daily life. That's one of my big objections to the vaccine passport is I don't think it's necessary. I don't think it's useful. And another objection I have is how easy it's going to be to walk around it. Let me give you a for instance. Let's say you have relatives over in Syracuse, New York, or one of the Great Lakes ports, and they have a cabin cruiser, and they've got family over in Canada. Okay, so they fire up the engines, they come across the lake, and they pull into either a marina or a private dock. What facilities do we have to make sure they've been double vaccinated? None. Some of these places don't have any facilities at all. You're supposed to report to customs, but some of these small marinas don't have a customs office or agent. Some of them do, for sure, but some of the busier ones. But to get around it, you just go to if your neighbor or friend is in a similar situation where they have their own private boat in a boathouse, you just go over there. And you just walk right around that whole passport nonsense. And it's going to happen. What about when they create a black market for counterfeit passports? Because people don't want it and are going to pay money to be able to say, yes, I have a passport without actually taking the vaccine. I mean, bootlegging is against the law, and yet making alcohol illegally, and yet it still happens. When people want something bad enough, they will find a way to get around it. Now, the numbers might not be huge. I'm not saying it's going to be widespread, but it's going to happen. You see it in the illegal cigarette trade. People smuggle cigarettes across the border all the time and avoid customs. If they can do it there, who's going to take the time and spend the resources to check every boat that comes across that lake? Good luck with that.
Well, those are all very good points, and there are in fact more points than I really was ready to respond to. No, and kudos to you for having laid them out, because some of those are actually things that I didn't really consider carefully. For me, the idea of a vaccine passport is not a big deal. Certainly not for international travel. As I've said many times to many people over the course of the past few months, I'm old enough where I remember that you couldn't travel to other countries without getting a visa. And by other countries, I mean countries that you would expect you could travel to, countries like, France and Switzerland and West Germany at the time, Belgium, Holland. These are all countries that, when I was first traveling, you had to have a visa to enter, and you had to apply for the visa here in Canada and fill out applications, etc., and they could give it to you or deny you the visa. And it was a great thing when different countries started doing away with the pre-visa approval process, because it really simplified international travel, made it easier. And we've become a little bit spoiled in that respect, because one of the requirements for entry into other countries was proof of vaccinations for a wide range of things. It could be smallpox, could be typhus, could be diphtheria, could be polio. There were a lot of things that countries governments wanted visitors to have vaccinations for. So as a matter of principle, I'm not opposed to the idea that, if you want to travel internationally, countries have the right to say, we want to make sure that you're properly vaccinated. And this just happens to be one of those things, whether you think it's a serious issue or not. Hey, I have news for you. People wanted you to have a polio vaccine, but polio was not exactly widespread when I was a youngster and when I first started to travel. So, the numbers are sometimes can fool you a little bit. But the point I'm making is, at least when it comes to international travel, I didn't see this as being such a big deal. And I still don't. That said, you raised some very interesting points. The first one, which actually I don't think you actually raised, but that I have some concerns over, is how far you extend the idea of a vaccine passport. It's one thing to have to prove vaccinations to enter another country or have people come and enter this country. It's another thing if you're talking about having to produce proof of vaccination before they'll let you go into a movie theater.
That's where I was going
or into
next.
A sports facility or to a concert or whatever. So that is really troubling. And let's be completely transparent here. The talk show host that you were talking about was Evan Solomon. So,
yes, it was.
And Evan, God bless Evan. He may think there's no big deal to this, but other people do think it's a big deal, and they have valid reasons, many of which you've pointed out, Nick. And I guess I can see the problem with administering it at more of a domestic level and a local level, in addition to finding ways to get around it either through bogus documents or simply bypassing proper border controls. And we all know how much of you, Nick, are in favor of that. But, I digress. So, but the points that you've raised, I think, are very good points. But I don't know what the solution to this is, Nick. I mean, the bottom line is this. I guess I wouldn't be forcing people to have vaccinations, but by the same token, you're going to have governments are going to make a decision on what they think the best solution is, and those governments